Hey guys, this is Jaster with KOR Live. Just a quick message here before we get into tonight's episode. This is a little bit new thing. We got ourselves a little mini series going on. So if you like what you hear and everything, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That kind of helps us out with that kind of thing. But most importantly, just let us know how you feel in the comments below. And thank you guys for your time. I'm not going to waste any more of it. Let's get into tonight's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the almost famous side show known as KOR After Hours, where we discuss the weird, wacky, and unbelievable things that occur here on planet Earth, you know what I'm saying? Coming to you live from Castle Rock, Washington, it is KOR Live. Now, Kaz, it's just me and you on this here thing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it ain't... I'm sitting here, I've already drank about half of my 40, and I'm starting to feel it because I don't drink very often, so, like, that intro would be a little scuffed, but
It
you
was,
know,
yeah, you kind of wobbled a little bit, but
yeah, because I'm wobbling a little bit, you know what I'm saying,
we'll keep it.
So, yeah, I got the place right,
yeah,
at least,
yeah,
you know?
did, yeah. So
My map got me here.
why Castle Rock, Washington? Well, it's because this town is a stone's throw away from Mount St. Helens, which is the topic of our episode. If you listen to our last After Hours episode, you'll remember we talked about Bat Squatch and Mount St. Helens, and we all laughed at how ridiculous that was and how stupid it was. But we were all like, Mount St. Helens is such a big nexus of Squatch activity. We could honestly do an episode about that. And it's not the first time that the location itself has come up in our After Hours discussions. One of the earliest mentions of it was actually when we did talk about the Skookum cast during our iceberg. And we were all like, yeah, it was bad science. Nobody watched it. Everybody was pretty sure it was a deer or an elk, you know, so on and so forth. But that's not to say that, and of course there's also Ape Canyon, which also happened, that incident happened in the vicinity of Mount St. Helens, and we're actually going to be revisiting that tonight. And of course there's the passive mention of allegedly sights of Sasquatches fleeing the mountain before it erupted. So that's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about Mount St. Helens, which is probably in the epicenter of a large area of Sasquatch activity. There is it's believed that there is a highway route that passes through the Cascades. And I know my man Thinker Thunker proposed it. He calls it a superhighway. And
I mean, geographically speaking, I think that makes sense. There's a lot of animals that use those areas to traverse. Like, they're all out of the way.
And where do a lot of the earliest accounts of Bigfoot come from? The Pacific Northwest, which is where Mount St. Helens is located. So,
well, I think we did actually kind of straighten that up a little bit. As far as like the Native Americans go, it actually is Alaska. Like, there was a tribe up in Alaska that has the earliest known oral history mentions of what they called the Saskets.
oops.
So, but as far as I would say American Bigfootology, you know what I'm saying? Like, the Native Americans, like, they seen them fucking everywhere. Like, if you want to, it's actually kind of hard to really pinpoint who the first person was, like, the first tribe was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they were able to kind of date it back more towards Alaska, which I think is insanely interesting too. You know,
Yeah.
It's in that part of the continent, which is rough, rugged. That's wild man country right there. You know what I'm saying? So I was able to find something kind of cool. Now, I'm not entirely sure. It's called OregonLive.com. I'm not sure what exactly this is. But they have essentially a article where they brought up an account of the Ape Canyon incident from the perspective of the townsfolk that they went out and they first notified after they had the Ape Canyon incident. You want to hear about that?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Let's start off with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, because like everybody kind of hears Fred Beck's side of the story. I
Yeah.
found this kind of
I
interesting.
remember we talked about that in his weird spirit guide, and just how much of a strange individual he is in general.
Yeah, and we'll get into it a little bit more because yeah, there's some weird shit that happens. But and apparently in the summer of 1924, a group of gold prospectors just stumbled out of the woods, looked like they'd seen a ghost, shaking and glassy eyed, is what the original account stated. Stating that they had seen 7-foot tall ape like animals attacking them with boulders. And that's where they name dropped the Fred Beck, Gabe Leveffer, John Peterson, Marion Smith, and Smith's son Roy described coming upon quote unquote gorilla men where they had built a small cabin for gold hunting. Now, they claimed they were 8 miles from Spirit Lake. So, like, Spirit Lake, for reference, is the lake northeast of Mount St. Helens. It's like north by northeast. There's also Coldwater Lake and Castle Lake right there, right at the mountain itself. And then you got a couple more lakes in the area. But they were near Spirit Lake when they had this set of encounters. Now, these guys go up into a pretty good description by all accounts of like what they'd seen with a big old hairy man throwing rocks at him, and then going into description of what happened afterwards. In all accounts, their descriptions of these individuals is pretty descriptive for what time period it was. They were saying like they were 7 foot tall. They moved through the forest with erect human-like strides, and they were covered in long black hair. Their ears were about 4 inches long and stick straight up. They have 4 toes, short and stubby. And witnesses estimated each animal weighed at like around 400 or more pounds. Now, that's where they get into them telling the townsfolk that Fred Beck had shot one with a rifle 3 times, and the animal toppled off the side of a cliff. And that night, that was when their cabin was attacked.
You know, before we get into all that, what I want to focus in on is the detail where they say they have ears that are 4 inches tall and stick straight up.
That's what I'm saying.
Interesting, is what that is.
Well, the feet too, 4-toed feet. That's another subtype of cryptid that's kind of known for that. And that's gugwies.
Yeah.
Like, and if they're more baboon-like in appearance, like I can also see their ears being a little different than a gorilla-like individual. Like, let me look it up, make sure I'm not crazy, but like I'm pretty sure baboons have a little bit more distinct ears. No, not really. They're poofy. They're poofy little dudes.
I don't remember that detail coming up in Fred Beck's account.
No, like I said, this is like from an article posted, or a newspaper article report from the Oregonian.
Okay, so I remember that the story got picked up nationally. Was this the first newspaper article about it?
I am looking at. It's called the Oregonian File. No.
I remember one thing we talked about was how that the story got picked up by newspapers, and a lot of them began exaggerating details about it and wholesale making things up. Mischaracterizing the people involved in the incident, and
what it looks like to me, I'm getting down to the thing here. So the art, like the news place itself, is called Oregon Live. Now, I haven't done too much research on who exactly these people are, so these guys could come out to be phony or whatever. I'm not entirely sure, but they are referencing a article that Anita Nygaard wrote back in 1974, along with I'm seeing a cutout of an old school ass newspaper, but it's not showing me like dates and shit like that. But this article does kind of go into what this original news report had said. I'm just not getting the best citations for this shit. It's
As it goes with Bigfoot.
Right.
Yep.
No one wants to put their damn name
Bad
in
citations say it isn't so.
Right. Now, like, they do name drop some stuff that I want to kind of get into here that we can deal with. So, after the men had said something to these people, they had, let me see. The U.S. Forest Service, back in 1924, decided to investigate the account associated with the Ape Canyon incident. And you were looking at, like, forest rangers J.H. Huffman and William Welch hiked into the forest with Fred Beck, who took them to the cliff where he had said the wounded ape man had fallen. And then, apparently, one of the rangers went down this inaccessible quote-unquote canyon and found nothing. Now, after that, they went to the Beck cabin, the group of men, the rangers and Fred Beck, and like, according to them, the rangers weren't impressed, and they concluded that the gold miners most likely had probably placed the large stones there themselves, which I'm not entirely sure about. But Huffman had also, like, one of the Oregonian reporters on the scene whenever they returned asked the rangers when they got back to town what they thought about the 14-inch long footprints found near the cabin. And Huffman allegedly went, like, basically grabbed his knuckles in the palm of his right hand and he made a giant impression into the ground. And he goes, they made him that way. So, like, he's not... There's a fair amount of people on site that weren't exactly impressed with the story that it has now become basically Bigfoot legend.
Yeah.
And that's normally not something you hear about, because, like, everybody's like, oh, they called him crazy, all this other kind of shits. And then they go and try and decipher Fred Beck's autobiography, and that's kind of, like, nuts in the first place, because that man was kind of wild.
Yeah.
So, now, I will say that a group of gold miners prospecting in the early 1900s far out of town towards God's knows where, up in the middle of the mountains, probably would be one of the first people that probably would find Bigfoot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it doesn't help that Fred Beck's like one of these types that believes he's being seen by spirit guides and sees them as he's being directed towards, like, veins of gold.
Yeah.
Which is rough.
It casts a lot of doubt on the credibility of the story, which is already extraordinary to begin with. So it, it's like, yeah, these people were there. Oh, and by the way, one of them was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and said there was the spirit of a Native American woman leading him to the gold.
And, well, everybody kind of, as they, like, something that I do want to bring up is that the other members of this gold mining expedition kind of were of the opinion, they're like, yeah, old buddy here is a little crazy, but we're gonna go out there and we're gonna make sure he doesn't die. You know what I mean? And that was the experience they had had. And another thing that kind of leads a little more to the credibility of what these men are saying is, like, there's not been a whole lot of variation in the story.
No.
So, like, they're all telling them pretty much the same thing, maybe a little bit here and there. Like, even them, as the U.S. Forest Service had said, they reported that their experiences give them the belief that these 5 men believe that they actually saw something which cannot be explained.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they didn't find any outward direct evidence of it themselves. They were like, these guys definitely believe whatever they're saying is true. Now, it looks like a local Cowlitz tribe member, a member of a Native American group that's actually closer to the Castle Rock area. Like, I guess, I know that's where Cowlitz River's on. I would think that's where they would probably be. Who knows? I'm not big on the folklore thing. That would take a lot more research than I have time. They do. This man, his name's Mr. Wanase, and he's like a local in the area. Talked about the tribe elders and the peculiar creatures, and they said they were about 9 to 10 feet tall, large in stature, and their bodies covered with long hair, and they were hardly if ever seen traveling only at night. So like I said, it corresponds to a lot of things going on in the Bigfoot world and the Bigfoot discussion. You know, that's something that gets me is that, yeah, there's been Mount St. Helens got some crazy shit going on around it as far as claims.
Here's the thing. They just recently found the site of the cabin and the mine.
Really?
It was lost for a long time. I remember offhandedly mentioning an individual who believed he had found the location of the cabin and was going to start a dig there to make sure. And the name of the mine is the Vanderwhite Mine. And they actually did find the cabin site itself. So, if I may,
yeah, go ahead.
This is coming off an article on Wild Man of the Woods. It's a blog. In and of itself is citing the Sasquatch Tracks podcast episode, Return to Ape Canyon, Rediscovery of the Vanderwhite Mine. The podcast episode itself was released November 30th last year, which was around the time we were going through our Sasquatch iceberg, if you'll recall. And we were pretty deep in it at that point.
God, I wish we would have figured this out, then that would be really dope. That'd have been a cool thing to talk about.
This blog post itself was written in about December, around the same time. So, the blog post starts out with a retelling of the infamous attack, and all of that stuff. And there's some really fantastical illustrations that I'm pretty sure AI generated, of the attack itself. You can take a look on the blog post, Jaster.
Are any of them missing fingers?
Well, I don't know. Just I dropped both of the links, and one of them, there's this cabin that's settled pretty precariously, and it's also
yeah, I'm looking at that too. It's looking a little funny.
Not to mention, so yeah, I don't know. So anyway, so it starts off with a retelling of the attack. So Mark Marcel is the individual who he is a land surveyor, so he dedicated free time to investigating the history behind the attack. He began looking through newspaper articles, old maps, mining documents, and photos. And he was looking for the precise location of the cabin near Spirit Lake on Mount St. Helens, Washington. He spent a lot of time exploring the rugged terrain of the mountain. He spent countless weekends navigating the basalt canyons. And this is all quoting the blog post, mind. And hillsides near the lake. And he located the site. So he made a publication called Mountain Devil, the 1924 Ape Canyon Attack and its Aftermath, which is a book that you can get. I'm going to have to order this book because I actually remembered mentioning this book because I'd heard him talk about it on Sasquatch Chronicles podcast.
Right. So, like,
And
this guy is actually just a land surveyor.
he's a land
that
surveyor.
wanted to
Yeah,
do this for
it's
the
it's so it's actually a 30-page zine, but it won an award the year it was published. It's a compilation of historical facts, photos, and eyewitness accounts. And so, so then, um, Mark Mirso led a team out there, and they did an archaeological dig. Uh, they found a mine entrance that was marked by the drill holes that were present, and um, there was a broken off saw blade next to a stump that supported their findings and other field evidence, and they realized they had located the cabin. They found other artifacts, including balling wire, a spoon, nails, and the foundation of the cabin. Nails still driven into the logs. Even though the area had been overgrown, they had been able to uncover two walls of the cabin as well as some crossbeams by digging them down about 4 to 6 inches. So
that is crazy.
Yeah, so like
a lot of people were kind of wondering if this place even existed, or these dudes just wandered around in the woods for a couple weeks.
You know, and he engaged with descendants of the miners and listened to oral histories and personal accounts, and and so it's a massive achievement in the field of not just Bigfoot research, but just like historical investigation and folklore and stuff like that. Because part of what makes the Ape Canyon incident so mystifying and so alluring is how vivid it is, in how it's tied so blatantly to a well-known period of our country's history, which is the gold rush. And not to mention it's so fantastical. These guys holed up in a cabin, shooting through the chinks of the wall, and all these big apes attacking them. It's just like, I remember even when I was a kid reading about it for the first time. It captured my imagination. So.
No, absolutely.
So
like,
we're still while it may not be certain the ape attack happened, we do know where the cabin was. We do know where their gold mine was, and we have the name of the mine itself. It was the Vanderwhite Mine. So without a shadow of a doubt, there was in fact a mine at Ape Canyon that these prospectors were at. So even if the legitimacy of the attack is within question, the location itself was real, and that's that more than anything means something.
So with that, I kind of want to move over to the 1980s.
You don't have any passing comments on that?
I do think that it is an important thing for the area, and it's a bigger thing for the Bigfoot side of the discussion, because, like I said, we were having a hard time even saying that the location in which it happened was real in the first place. Like, no one's seen this mine. It was like freaking looking for Bigfoot City of El Dorado for all intents and purposes.
It really was.
Like, trying to figure out where this place was crazy. The journey there through the freaking some of the hardest terrain in the Pacific Northwest is nuts.
Yeah,
I
remember
there's apparently Bigfoot
Mark
out
Marcel
there.
specifically said, like, the location it is at now in the present is one that you have to be a very experienced hiker to get to, because like if any Joe Schmo tried to get there, you could easily get injured or lost or worse.
Which is crazy.
And he let a whole
these dudes were able
team
to
out
figure
there. And he let a whole team out there.
So like Fred Beck in and of himself was at least skilled in something. You know what I mean? He's able to get in and out, discover things like that, and lead people in and out without getting a whole bunch of people lost. Apparently, it was just not the right place to be.
I mean, the
Now, like, the
landscape
gold
was,
apparently was awesome.
the landscape was probably different back then.
Oh, yeah. And I think when I do hear about that through podcast episodes, that's something that's brought up a lot, is that the big issue with trying to find this place is that so much has changed in the landscape as far as foliage and fauna and all that other kind of stuff in the, like, 100 years since the event had taken place, that you're really looking at, like, topographical maps, looking for stone and mountains and ridges and things like that, instead of trying to trust the reports of foliage, arborage in the area, trees, all that kind of stuff, you know. Which, at least for modern accounts and reports, that stuff can still hold some water.
Yeah.
You know, when someone's talking about, like, changes in, like, the tree lines and all that other kind of stuff, like, unless there'd been a wildfire or something, that generally still holds true decade to decade, but not century to century.
Yeah. It's still, it's just, you know, it's just wild to think that, you know, what's basically, you know, like, it more or less a hallowed site in Bigfoot lore has been ID'd. I mean, you know, nobody's going to be able to get out there because, again, it's so deep in the wilderness. But, like, we can now point at a map and say, it's right here.
Nuts.
This is where it's
I don't
happened.
think we're going to get the exact coordinates, because, like, for all intents and purposes, like, that mine has not been touched. And, like, I think there's a lot of people that'd be like, well, that mine is still there full of gold.
Yeah, and it's also
So I
100
think they're
years
gonna
old, and
try-
any supports they had in there are probably long since rotted.
Right. I don't think it's a good idea to go in there, but you know how people be.
So,
Gold being expensive now.
yeah.
Now, do you want to go ahead and...
Now we can swap topics. Yeah, it's...
Alright, so we were talking about in the last KOR Live or After Hours episode that the Bat Squatch had allegedly been seen exiting the vicinity after the Mount St. Helens eruption. And we were talking about it and, like, wasn't really getting a lot of traction, and, like, for good reason, to be fair. But I was like, man, I know I'd heard some stories about people, like, in fire and rescue and stuff like that had come forward and were talking about this kind of stuff, okay? And so I'd found something on SasquatchTheLegend.com, which is a blog that's ran by Christina Hebert. And this is like a community of people that actually, like, I would say it's like a blog forum where people come forward with their encounters, all this other kind of stuff, okay? And this report had came from a group of people that served in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the National Guard, allegedly.
Okay. The individual themselves is pretty trustworthy by, you know, Squatch eyewitness standards.
And if they were vetted, I hope they were vetted, but like I said, I'm just reading the article with them. I hope they did their due diligence. But I've heard this before, and I've heard this from Sasquatch Chronicles, and they've had people on their show, when they talk about it, like, they try their best to vet their identity as best as possible, you know what I mean? So hopefully due diligence was done. But I find this an interesting account because this isn't the first one I've heard of. And according to these people, they were called upon to help in the rescue and recovery operations. And they would recover bodies of deer, elk, bear, other animals. They were rendering aid to animals, humans, anything they could find that were needing medical attention. And that was when these people were walking through bodies that were set aside, covered with tarps, and guarded by armed men. And witnesses were warned to keep quiet about what they had, like, what was going on. And so they took a look around, and they see the bodies of two Sasquatch on this pile of animal bodies. Now, reportedly, this wasn't the only Sasquatch encounter on Mount St. Helens after the eruption. So, one purported witness states that him and some other men were told to follow a very large, hairy, man-like creature with a sad demeanor and burned arm into the forest, right? Like, apparently they had one of these things in the facility that they were in, or base camp or whatever, and he was trying to get back into the forest, and they weren't letting it, so they were like, okay, let's have a group go follow it where it was going. And they were stopping along inside the forest at isolated rocky areas with caves, and when they stopped, the creature would make a strange sound. And then sometimes when he made this strange sound while they were passing a cave, they would hear a second sound. So using this method, they were able to locate some badly burned Sasquatch. So they, like, apparently they were helping this Sasquatch find other ones and bring into this camp for medical attention. And during debriefing, they were told that these Bigfoot creatures live in the forest, they just want to be left alone, and they were asked to keep quiet in order to protect the few that were still left alive. And, you know what I mean? Now,
That's...
let me say...
Oh, is there more?
Yes, okay. So, like, this next bit comes from some people that were serving in an Air Force rescue operation unit. And they were said that they were tasked with putting on green helmets marked guard along with their military uniforms, and they were issued M16s, and they were told to protect these medical tents and prevent unauthorized people from entering the tent, right? Standard stuff. So what they said was doctors were guiding quote-unquote unusually tall people wrapped in overcoats with their heads covered into the medical tent. The injured beings were always covered with clothing and bandages so that their faces and hands could not be seen. This was a mystery to the men that they were guarding, but they were told that they were guarding victims of the eruption and not ask any questions. Now, apparently a lot of the people in these stories, like, they completed their missions, just moved on without ever finding out what happened to the beings involved. Now, some people say that these beings were relocated to other parts of the Cascade Mountains, while others say that these beings were given a home on a military base. Which, I mean, to be fair, the one that they got listed here is like 86,000 acres of mountainous terrain. So, like, that wouldn't be a completely shitty situation. It's not like they were stuck in a building or something. You know what I mean? Like, they had, like, a good amount of forested mountainous terrain to run around on, if that's the case. Now, the big thing about all this, in my opinion, is that, like, it's a hard one without being able to, me personally, see your, like, your identification in the military to kind of lend credence to what you're saying. So you kind of have to extend some trust to the people that are reporting on this. You know, like, they did that. Like, they went to that level of vetting to hopefully bring us something that has some amount of truth to it. Because we don't have video. We don't get photos.
Yeah.
You know? Like, that's the thing with the Mount St. Helens incident, is that you would think, you would hope, somewhere, some way, there was some sort of video, some sort of camera evidence of the situation. Because it is a pretty televised, a pretty well recorded disaster when it did happen. And so, who knows? Maybe it was one of those things where they were really good at figuring out who had those photos and taking them cameras. Or taking the reel, you know what I mean? They pulled a Kaz on them. Where that camera got disappeared. So, Mount St. Helens is not without its level of mystery, even in its darkest moments. And a lot of people keep saying the same kind of thing about the area, you know what I mean? And it's not like you don't get people with footprints coming in. That I think there have been some good videos coming out of the area or at least like what was it? I don't believe the Sierra Sounds were a part of. No, I don't even know if they were in the same area. To be fair, I think they were of the United States, but I don't think like this area has a lot of Bigfoot evidence. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, there's a lot of weird things that happen with Mount St. Helens, like UFOs and all that other kind of stuff, but we would have to save that for another episode.
Yep.
With that, I do think we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. What do you got to say, Cass?
Well, I didn't even need to actually comment on that section. Because you just read that account and I didn't even get to comment on it.
What do you think?
Wild if true. This is like, there's always been whispers and rumors of, there were Sasquatches in the fires of Mount St. Helens and stuff like that, and actually finding accounts of people saying, hey, this is what I did in the aftermath, is pretty wild to me, actually, just because it's something I never thought I'd actually have, like, a proper concrete account for. Now, of course, we're going entirely off of these people's word. This isn't like the location of the Ape Canyon Cabin where, it was found through mountaineering, archaeology, stuff like that. This is solely, words of, people who, write, like, but, so, like, there is that to account for, but, drink my water here. I feel like at the same time, these were all separate accounts, right? All three of these?
Yes.
These were all three separate accounts of people. So we had somebody who was working as a guard. We had somebody who was nursing these people, and we had somebody who just saw these tents from the outside. Yeah, is that just kind of review our accounts?
We had seen somebody who had seen a a pile of bodies of animals that had passed away due to the fire, and there were Sasquatches on them.
Okay.
And then they had a dude that was sent on guard duty for people that were dressed in abnormally large overcoats from head to toe, and you couldn't see their faces or their hands or anything. Mm-hmm. And then you had someone that was tasked with following one of these creatures out into the devastation to locate and retrieve other members of its, like, pod or tribe.
Okay. Yeah.
Which, like I said, they're wild if true. Like, I don't know. Part of me feels like there's not that it all feels like if this were to happen to a group of, like, say for instance, like, non-technologically equipped Aboriginal tribes somewhere, if they, like, say somewhere in Africa or Australia or anywhere had some natural disaster happen and the local government tried to come in and help them, I feel like this is pretty much the same kind of stories I would hear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the way that they allegedly worked with these individuals more reminds me of how we would work with other humans rather than other animals.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, I don't know. There's a lot to these Bigfoot stories in the way that apparently the alleged humans that are in the know of the existence of Bigfoot treat them like a type of human rather than a type of animal. That's always an interesting line for me, because it's like I would say you more often hear the relic hominid theory come out of people that involve the government and the people that are in the know rather than people in the primate category. Mm-hmm. Or in that sense.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Like, to me, that does kind of make sense to me. You know, like, if the government does know of the existence of Bigfoot, and it would not explain how they are talking about it if it was a ape. If it was a great ape. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, like, at least in regards to these individuals, it's been so long that it doesn't matter, and, I'm not referring to a statute of limitations or anything, but, like, secrecy was only really needed for that operation in that moment, and so on and so forth, and...
It's something that happened 40 years ago.
Yeah, exactly, like...
a lot of people that were in the positions of power at the time are either retired or done anyway.
Yeah.
So like that's something that always happens. Like you see that in a lot of different things. So yeah,
I
like
think I
to
also,
me,
more than anything, you know, part of the reason they had to get up in there is because there was all of a sudden there was national attention on this region because of this
right,
catastrophic event that had occurred. We talked about, the actual deaths of real people, last episode when we started talking about Mount St. Helens, and we started talking about, some of the men that were up there and that died, and gave their lives so we could know things about it. And, um, like it's a heavy topic. And
no, absolutely, absolutely,
and
and like
I think more than anything, something about there's something mysterious and alluring about St. Helens, um, like even to this day, because there's still a lot of wreckage left over from the explosion that's up there, like cabins that were buried and stuff like that. It's just sitting up there, and you can hike up to like the lip of the dome that got blown off. You know, like it's wild, man. Like
no, like god damn, that's the thing about all of this is like there's a lot of history in the area.
yeah,
Like the Cascades in and of themselves is a weird mountain range. Like this is just one of maybe 3 big mountains in the Cascades we could talk about with Bigfoot and paranormal stuff.
yeah,
Like the others being Mount Shasta
Mount,
and Mount Rainier.
there's also, to a lesser extent, Crater Lake.
Yes, like there's a lot going on in that region when it comes to weird stuff happening, and maybe we'll start something like that where we kind of go around geography, talking about stuff. I think that would be.
That
Kinda
would be
cool.
a fun little series. Yeah.
I like that. Let's talk about Bigfoot in regions. That'd be fun.
Sasquatch road trip, something like that.
Something like that. We'll figure it out. So, with that, is there anything else that you'd like to add to this episode, Cats?
I mean, really, yeah, just I guess we'll never really know for sure. Is the thing.
And if we may, I think the big thing with this kind of stuff is there's got to be something going on with it that keeps it out of the truth out of our hands. You know what I mean? And the other big thing about Bigfoot is that it gives there's some plausible deniability to any, not even just the government, but any mainstream institution right now have taken the whole well, I mean, there's no evidence of it. You don't want to be right or wrong, or you know what I mean, with that kind of shit. So I think if this thing does exist, I think it would be a complicated route of how you would deal with it when you're talking about addressing it to the American people.
Yeah, because I remember we discussed this way back when, is that there's a lot of industries at stake, when it comes to Sasquatch, foresting and park industries and stuff like that, and unlike UAPs, where they're being discussed because they're a potential threat. They're being discussed because there's all this blue collar crime, white collar crime going on around it, stuff like that.
Generally not the same for Bigfoot.
Yeah, it's like Bigfoot. You don't have all these commissioned officers and government officials coming forth saying, "I want to speak up," but somebody is trying to silence me. Nobody's trying to speak up because I wouldn't say, there's this Well, okay, all right, okay. So here, let me put it this way: with UAPs, there is a explicit campaign of disinformation and blackmail because of it represents the interest of whoever. It's better for the interest of whoever is behind these campaigns to do this, to discredit these people, because it keeps them whatever political or technological leverage they may or may not have. I say may or may not,
Yeah.
and I'm leaning more towards may because we have a congressional hearing where it was confirmed that yes, the United States is, in possession of legacy aircraft and specimens related to UAP activity, and yes, there are individuals who have studied these things, and yes, there are people who have been harmed by studying these. No, they can't come out because they fear for their lives. And somebody, said that while under oath in a congressional hearing.
Like, I don't know. I think a lot of this shit does give the government some plausibility of just testing out wild aircraft. You know what I mean? Like the Nighthawk and the Spectre, the B-2 bomber, were both reported as UFOs.
So,
Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Like,
Yeah. And so really, ultimately, I think when it comes to Bigfoot, it's less so, oh well, we have these things in our possession and we want. God damn, sorry. It's late when
No,
we're
you're
recording this, which is why I'm yawning so much. It's
We're getting bending the midnight oil, baby.
Yeah, we are just a little bit. It's more so that like they are aware of this. I have heard stories from gentlemen who have been, night guards, patrolmen on military bases where these things are known to be a nuisance, and they just kind of leave them alone and let them be. Really good channel that I really like. It's called Wartime Stories. Jaster, you should check it out. But
Yeah, show shows me that one too. I do watch that. It is a good
they
one.
just did an episode recently about military base like patrol encounters with Sasquatches and stuff like that, and the attitude there is towards them.
Dude, I like their Vietnam Rockman episode. That one was really good.
Yeah, no, the show's amazing, and if you guys haven't watched it, I highly recommend it because it is a paranormal show that focuses explicitly on paranormal encounters of like servicemen and stuff like that in wartime settings.
Not bad. A good shout out because it's a very good channel.
Yeah,
It's definitely worth
run by
y'all's
an
time.
actual veteran too. So,
Even an added bonus there.
yeah, so it's legit. They always have amazing artwork accompanying each episode. The narration is fantastic. It's good stuff. Like, and they're always pretty lengthy too. Like that and Bob Gemlin are like my two like number one like paranormal channels. I don't know. TT has kind of fell in my prospects a bit lately. Ever since he moved to monetize his stuff, I've been a little less. I don't know. So.
See, you gotta get on the Dixie Cryptid hype train, bro. Like, dude, that's the shit. That's the place to be. Like, I don't even care if, like, it's just everybody knows it's stories sent in by people. You know what I mean? So, these could be real, these could be fake, whatever. But they're interesting stories. I like that. It's a good... And you get through ones that are, like, very obvious. These guys are like, this happened to me. And he's like... And the guy's like, dude, this guy even sent me his, like, military ID copy or whatever, you know what I mean? So he's, like, trying to say he's real, the deal, you know what I mean? When he gets there. So, like, you get stories that are just randomly sent in without much info. You get other ones that are sent in with a bunch of background info. It's a good channel to get into. I really do like Dixie Cryptid. However, with that, I think it's
about time we wrap it up.
Go ahead and... Yeah, because Kaz's getting over here dying.
We're both kind of feeling a little tired.
Yeah, so. I'm feeling the Bud Light. You know what I'm saying? So, with that, that wraps up this episode of KOR Live After Hours. Thank you guys for listening. If you got all the way to the end, like, comment, subscribe, follow, do all that good stuff. Our social links are in the description, and we'd like to thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you guys. This is Jaster with KOR Live, and y'all have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.